Greetings, Commanders, and welcome to the Friendship Drive Beginner's Guide to the Ships of Elite Dangerous. This is going to be a little bit of a weird guide because I won't be telling you what ships to fly. I'm a firm believer in flying whatever you like the most, even if it's not the right ship for the job. However, I will give you an overview of some of the first ships you might upgrade to and why, and a rough guide to some of the other ships of Elite and what they might be used for. So let's get started. First of all, you will start in a Sidewinder. It'll do you well for your first few hours out in the galaxy, but most likely you'll be looking for an option to upgrade pretty soon. There are a few options you might choose from, and I'm going to go over them first. These upcoming suggestions are primarily for your first or second ship that you might buy, and we'll go into more detail about other ships later in the video. If you're looking for combat, you can very quickly pick up an Eagle Mark II, which is a faster, sleeker looking ship. Compared to the Sidewinder, it trades off one of the two utility mounts for an additional small hardpoint, giving you slightly more firepower. You also gain some extra optional internal slots, allowing for a bit more customizability. Alternatively, you can choose to skip the Eagle and pick up a Viper Mark III instead. It's a bit more expensive, but has two small and two medium hardpoints, giving it a bit more bite than an Eagle. It also has more optional internal slots. Both the Eagle and the Viper are mostly useful for combat. If you'd like to do some trading, you can pick up a Hauler or an Adder. These ships are pretty similar, but the Adder does come out on top with slightly higher cargo capacity in a trading build, whereas the Hauler tops out at a slightly higher jump range and is cheaper, so it's really up to you which you prefer. After either of these ships, you can choose to pick up something like the Type 6 transporter for the extra cargo capacity. The Type 6 saw me through lots of early game rare goods trading way back when I first started. For mining, the Adder is once again a wonderful starting point as you gain access to a medium hardpoint, meaning you can use a seismic charge launcher for deep core mining, which can bring in the good profits. After you make a decent bit of money mining, you may want to take something like a keelback, which allows you to bring all the mining tools and also a fighter for extra self-defense, or even the Asp Explorer, which has a decent cargo capacity. For exploration, you really can take any ship you want, but if jump range is what you're looking for, there are a few ideal ships to get you started. This is probably the only place where I can say with certainty that a Hauler is actually a good choice, as it gets the highest jump range out of all the beginner ships and is really reasonably priced. It is ugly, but it gets you places, and it was the first ship I took out on an exploration journey. After that, the Diamondback Explorer is an excellent option that shouldn't be too far out of your price range, although again, we'll talk about other ship options afterwards. Now I want to mention my favourite ship in the entire game. For multi-rolls at the beginning, nothing beats the Cobra Mark III. It's just shy of 350,000 credits to buy, and it fits so many rolls well that I still come back to it for some mission running, material gathering, or even just to fly around because I like it. If you fancy doing multiple rolls in Elite near the beginning, you can't go wrong fitting out a Cobra Mark III. The only thing I will mention is that its hardpoints don't converge very well due to the medium hardpoints being out on the wing, so I recommend using gimbaled weapons rather than fixed if you're doing combat. Now that we've covered ships you might be encountering in your first few hours or days of Elite, let's talk about the ships you might want to aim for in the future. For combat, assuming you flew one of the ships I recommended already and enjoy the smaller ship combat, a Vulture is a wonderful option. It has two large hardpoints, making it a force to be reckoned with. Alternatively, there are plenty of medium ships to choose from to aim for. The Fer-de-Lance is a firm favourite amongst the community and is especially popular with a player versus player crowd. There's also the Crate Mark II, which can carry a fighter, or the Alliance Chieftain, which is one of my personal favourites just because I find it a joy to fly. You can fit almost any ship out for PvE combat and missions though, so take some time to experiment and find one that you enjoy flying. For trading, the Type 7 is a good next step with a decent cargo capacity and surprisingly also great for carrying passengers even when compared with comparable passenger ships. Just beware its very large forehead when docking and undocking, as it's really quite big. Otherwise, you can fly multi-role ships for trade, which I'll talk about in a moment, then eventually build up to something bigger like the Type 9 or the ship with the highest potential cargo capacity, the Imperial Cutter. But do be warned, the Imperial Cutter is pretty expensive and it requires Empire rank, which will take some time to achieve. Mining's a tricky one, because I think my choice is a little weird. I personally really like to bring a medium ship like a Python for mining, but it's for a strange reason. It's not just because it means I can land on outposts, which only have small and medium landing pads to sell my haul. While that is definitely important to me, I also get a little bit of serotonin every time I see my credit balance going up. For that reason, I actually like having to go back to a station to sell more frequently, as I like selling and seeing the fruits of my labour. If you prefer having a larger cargo hold and going back less frequently, by all means bring a bigger ship. Later on that might be an Anaconda or even again an Imperial Cutter. In the beginning though, an Asp Explorer is a wonderful starting point, and then a Python, and whatever you can afford and choose to fly as you continue. When it comes to exploration, there's a pretty intense debate. If we consider jump range to be the most important, then the Diamondback Explorer is an amazing ship that many commanders stick with for a very long time. But I have always loved the Asp Explorer. Not only is it a great multi-role ship, but its jump range isn't much smaller than the DBX, and it has a much larger optional internal slot, meaning it can fit a bigger fuel scoop. Less time spent idly scooping fuel at stars is a win for me, so I personally stuck with it for a long time, but either is fine. It's worth noting that the DBX is significantly cheaper than the Asp Explorer. You may also want to go with a Crate Phantom, which I finally started using in place of the Asp that has done me so well for many years, but it is down to personal choice. The Phantom gets a slightly higher jump range than the Asp and slightly lower than the DBX. Eventually, you may want to go with an Anaconda to get the absolute highest potential jump range, but it's worth noting that its nose is visible the entire time you're jumping around. This isn't a problem if you're going to be using the free camera to look around and take screenshots, but if the view from your cockpit matters to you, I wasn't a big fan of the Anaconda for exploration. And finally, I promised we'd talk about multi-roles again. If you've been flying a Cobra Mark III for this purpose, a great next step is the Asp Explorer. It can mine, trade, or run passenger missions, do a little bit of combat if needed, and can make a wonderful explorer. After that, a Python is a fantastic upgrade. Nowadays, I fly a Python for any passenger missions or small-scale trading missions, anytime I go mining, and occasionally even just for general mission running. I have purposefully not covered every ship in this video because there are 38 ships in total, and the video would be ridiculously long if I went into detail about each individual one and its purpose. However, I hope this has helped you understand what ships might be worth upgrading to as a beginner. In our next videos, we'll be going into basic flight tips and more top tips for new players. After that, we'll start breaking down each of the activities into an in-depth guide. Until then, fly safe and keep that friendship drive charging.